Okay. Hello, everyone. For those in South Africa, good afternoon. For those in Argentina, good morning. As a general announcement, kindly find on Zoom different channels for English and Spanish in simultaneous translation. Distinguished guests, my name is Bárbara Obercasas, and on behalf of the Embassy of Argentina and the Foundation for Human Rights, I would like to give you a warm welcome to this webinar, which we have called Argentina and South Africa, a dialogue on memory sites, truth, and justice, addressing past human rights violations. Before we start, I would like to apologize on behalf of Chargé d'Affaires Florencia Segura, who is not being able to attend due to an unforeseen commitment. She sent her regards and good wishes for this fruitful dialogue. I'm sure she will join us later. I would like to especially thank Ms. Hanif Bali and all the staff at the Foundation for Human Rights for co-organizing this wonderful initiative that highlights the importance of memory sites both in Argentina and South Africa. In fact, the Embassy of Argentina has a long-standing relationship with the Foundations of Human Rights. We have worked together for many, many years on different activities to promote human rights in Argentina and South Africa. And indeed, some of you might remember that the Foundation hosted the Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo in a public meeting, as well as received visits by members of different Argentine political parties to share their experiences on transactional justice. This fruitful relationship exists because, sadly, both countries have a dark past of gross human rights violations committed in Argentina during the civil military dictatorship in the 70s and the colonial apartheid and the apartheid era in South Africa. We have walked a long path to achieve our liberties and our freedoms, and we continue these fights against violations of human rights until today. As part of overcoming our pasts, we have in several occasions shared good practice and good experiences in terms of memory, truth, and justice. Today, in another of those instances, which we will share our experiences in order to prevent that crimes against humanity will ever happen again. We have quite an impressive panel, so I won't rob you more of your time. Before the interventions of our guests, we would like to mention that Argentina is promoting the candidacy of the ESMA Museum Memory Site to the World Heritage List of the UNESCO, and we will show you now a short video about that. Sorry, let's try again. There we go.
Aquí, en la ESMA, estuvieron detenidos desaparecidos hombres y mujeres, militantes políticos y sociales de organizaciones revolucionarias armadas y no armadas, trabajadores y gremialistas, estudiantes, profesionales, artistas y religiosos. La mayoría de ellos y ellas fueron arrojados vivos al mar. Aquí, en la ESMA, la Armada planificó secuestros y llevó a cabo asesinatos de manera sistemática. Aquí mantuvo a los prisioneros y prisioneras encapuchados y engrillados, Aquí les torturó. Aquí les desapareció. Aquí, en la ESMA, nacieron en cautiverio niños y niñas que fueron separados de sus madres. En su mayoría, fueron apropiados ilegalmente o robados. Muchos de ellos y ellas son los desaparecidos vivos que aún seguimos buscando. Aquí, en la ESMA, se produjo un crimen contra la humanidad. En el año 1972, la UNESCO aprobó la Convención sobre la Protección del Patrimonio Mundial Cultural y Natural, que ha sido ratificada por 191 países. En 2015, el Estado argentino inició ante UNESCO las gestiones para que el Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA, ex Centro Clandestino de Detención, Tortura y Exterminio, sea reconocido como Patrimonio Mundial, Patrimonio del Nunca Más. Otros lugares de memoria sirven como antecedente de nuestra candidatura. La isla de Gorée en Senegal y el muelle de Balongo en Río de Janeiro, Brasil, testimonios del comercio de esclavos. El campo de concentración y exterminio nazi Auschwitz-Birkenau en Polonia, símbolo del Holocausto. El Memorial de la Paz de Hiroshima en Japón, donde se utilizó por primera vez la bomba atómica. El Puente Viejo en el centro histórico de Mostar en Bosnia y Herzegovina, expresión de la convivencia en paz después de una guerra étnica. Y la prisión de Robben Island en Sudáfrica, símbolo de la lucha contra el apartheid. Que te vas para regalar un estadio.
Era sinónimo de asesinato.
Queremos saber dónde están nuestros hijos, vivos o muertos, pero queremos saber dónde están.
Encapuchado, están en esas condiciones, era una especie de limbo en donde sobre nuestra vida solamente decidían otros.
Estaba bastante organizado, no era un lugar donde no se podía estar, simplemente tenía condiciones más duras que otras, porque bueno, porque era muy chico, porque no había aire, porque hacía mucho calor en verano y mucho frío en invierno, porque era todo muy amontonado, y fundamentalmente porque estábamos al lado del lugar donde torturaban.
En el español, que se llama el español, donde había donde se ponía toda la ropa, era todo lo que sacaban de las casas de la gente que habían secuestrado, digamos, levantaban las casas, y yo encontré cosas ahí de la casa donde yo había sido secuestrada.
Tratar de hacer una vida lo más normal posible, de volver a retomar las cosas que a uno le gustaban, que a uno le apasionaban, y no siempre se lo consigue en absoluto. Pero en fin, la tortura, por eso yo digo, comienza un día y creo que no termina nunca.
Es una cosa terrible lo que pasó con las embarazadas, la separación de los niños.
En la Escuela de Mecánica de la Armada, integrantes del grupo de tareas 3.3 decidieron incluirlos en un traslado. Traslado que todos conocemos. Consistió en aplicarles una inyección total, pentonaval, mujer a los aviones de la muerte, la participación de los pilotos de la muerte. Decir, a las víctimas de este grupo se les causó la muerte en forma dolosa. Fueron arrojados mar adentro.
El apoyo y la participación de la comunidad y de los organismos de derechos humanos desde la inauguración del Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA son fundamentales para presentar nuestra candidatura a UNESCO y representan el logro de más de 40 años de lucha por la memoria, la verdad y la justicia. En 2019, dando continuidad a una política de Estado, el Ministerio de Justicia y la Secretaría de Derechos Humanos aprobaron nuestro plan de trabajo para proseguir las gestiones ante UNESCO. Esta presentación constituye un desafío y una oportunidad para el Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA. Un desafío porque nos compromete como institución y como Estado argentino a velar por el mantenimiento y la preservación del lugar según los estándares de la Convención sobre la Protección del Patrimonio Mundial Cultural y Natural. Una oportunidad, porque vamos a generar una amplia red de personas y actores comprometidos con nuestra profunda convicción de que la desaparición forzada de personas es un crimen de lesa humanidad que el mundo debe conocer y recordar, y que el Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA, ex centro clandestino de detención, tortura y exterminio, es un símbolo del valor del consenso social como medio para lograr justicia.
Now, our first speaker is Alejandra Naftal. Alejandra is the Executive Director of the ESMA Memory Site Museum in Argentina, which was a former clandestine center for detention, torture, and extermination during the civil and military dictatorship that ruled during the 70s in Argentina. Alejandra is a museologist and has been the director of the museum since its inauguration in 2015. And before that, she worked as a curator developing the museum. She has done extensive work in human rights and memory, and she has been leading the way in public campaigning for human rights most of her life. In 1978, when she was a secondary school student, she was illegally detained and disappeared. Once freed, she went into exile until 1983. Her testimony was part of the judiciary processes, both nationally and internationally. Alejandra, the floor is yours. Alejandra, todo tuyo.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Por esta invitación y este encuentro. En principio les quería pedir a todos y a todas si pueden silenciar los micrófonos, así no hay interferencias. Así que dicho esto, en principio quiero agradecer profundamente en nombre del Secretario de Derechos Humanos de la Nación Argentina, Horacio Pietragala Corti, por este encuentro y de todos y todas las que trabajamos en este proyecto y en el museo. A los organizadores de este encuentro, a la Embajada Argentina, nuestra querida Florencia Segura, nuestra querida Bárbara y a todo su equipo, y a la Fundación por los Derechos Humanos en Sudáfrica, con quien nos sentimos muy honrados de poder intercambiar experiencias. Y quiero hacer un agradecimiento especial a mis colaboradores en el plan de trabajo de la candidatura del Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA a Patrimonio Mundial de UNESCO, Mauricio Cohen Salama y Mikey Gorosito. También estoy muy contenta de estar aquí porque, como bien decía Bárbara al inicio, desde hace años tenemos un contacto muy fluido, especialmente con los compañeros y compañeras de Robben Island. Quiero mandarle un saludo especial a nuestro amigo Tarubinga, quien estuvo en Buenos Aires también compartiendo unas jornadas de trabajo que fueron muy fructíferas para nosotros. Vimos un video recién, Memoria Argentina para el Mundo, Patrimonio del Nunca Más, que justamente tiene como eslogan Memoria Argentina para el Mundo, porque es nuestra idea de que creemos que el museo sitio de memoria, que hoy funciona en lo que fue uno de los más de 600 lugares de represión ilegal que existieron en nuestro país, lo podemos pensar como una experiencia para visibilizarla en el mundo y que pueda contribuir a una verdadera cultura del nunca más. Y me gustaría contar con ustedes un poquito cuál es nuestra historia. Veo la presencia de muchas organizaciones de la sociedad civil para contarles un poquito lo que es este sitio de memoria, que justamente la importancia y la participación de las organizaciones de derechos humanos en mi país lo hicieron posible. Al igual que todos los países que han sufrido graves violaciones a los derechos humanos, la Argentina ha recorrido un camino doloroso de reconstrucción por medio del cual intentó reconocer y reparar de algún modo el sufrimiento de las víctimas y recuperar como sociedad la dignidad perdida. Y si bien en nuestro caso, como en muchos otros, las heridas abiertas no han terminado aún de cicatrizar, podemos estar orgullosos de haber logrado un consenso casi unánime en favor de la cultura del nunca más, y una condena igualmente enérgica y masiva a los crímenes de lesa humanidad cometidos por la dictadura cívico-militar que gobernó mi país entre 1976 y 1983. El Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA es hoy cabal expresión de ese contrato social que une a los argentinos y argentinas y se expresa a través de una política de Estado, resultado de una demanda permanente de memoria, verdad y justicia. Lo es porque su creación es producto de muchos años de debate y de búsqueda de acuerdos multisectoriales, y porque su exhibición permanente y el edificio en el cual está instalada dan cuenta del delito que caracterizó las horas más oscuras de nuestra patria y nos hizo tristemente célebres en el mundo: la desaparición forzada de personas dentro de un plan sistemático de represión ilegal y la tristemente figura del detenido y detenida desaparecida. Desde los primeros años de la dictadura, la ESMA fue un símbolo regional y mundial del drama que vivían la Argentina y otros países de América Latina, en el contexto de una corriente política y cultural que pretendía la supresión física de la oposición política con... Si pueden apagar los micrófonos, por favor. Gracias. Decía que la ESMA es un símbolo de lo que fue el plan sistemático de represión tanto en Argentina como en América Latina, que fue, por ejemplo, la implementación de instrumentos tales como el Plan Cóndor y los centros clandestinos de detención, tortura y exterminio. Ese poder simbólico persiste hasta hoy, cuando a diario comprobamos que se acercan al museo ciudadanos y ciudadanas de nuestro país y del mundo, de todos los estratos sociales y de las más diversas jerarquías institucionales. El museo fue inaugurado...
ESMA Memory Site Museum was inaugurated, as Barbara said in the beginning, as such on 19th of May 2015 under the presidency of Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, but although this is the date of the opening.
El museo es el resultado de más de 40 años de lucha y perseverancia del pueblo argentino y del movimiento de las organizaciones de derechos humanos, de las víctimas. Hoy, que no lo dije al principio, me siento honrada de compartir este panel con Sylvia Lavaidu. Ella es psicóloga, se va a presentar, pero es una compañera sobreviviente de la ESMA que podrá expresar lo que significó los años de lucha del movimiento de derechos humanos y de las víctimas. Y decía que el museo existe como tal por la maduración de la sociedad argentina en su conjunto para arribar a los consensos básicos de una cultura del nunca más. El proyecto del museo surge, como decía, de esta demanda social histórica y que fue escuchada y atendida por el Poder Ejecutivo, quien se comprometió con la provisión de todo tipo de recursos necesarios para su ejecución, teniendo como eje fundamental la convocatoria a diversos actores y sectores para que participen en esta tarea. La ESMA fue uno de los más de 600 lugares de represión ilegal que funcionaron en todos los años de la dictadura, pero la ESMA tiene como algo visible que funcionó durante todos los años de la dictadura y simultáneamente como una escuela para los marinos y como un campo de concentración. Como vimos en el video, en la ESMA se cometió un crimen de lesa humanidad y podemos tipificar los delitos que confirman esto: secuestro, tortura, desaparición, homicidio, asesinatos, violaciones a la integridad sexual, robo de bienes, extorsiones, falsificaciones de documentación y el terrible delito del robo y apropiación de los bebés nacidos en cautiverio. Es importante decir que todo lo que sabemos de lo ocurrido en este lugar es a través de las voces de los sobrevivientes, de los hombres y mujeres que han podido salir con vida de allí y que han declarado a lo largo de todos estos años en los juicios de lesa humanidad que se llevan adelante en el país con sus avances y retrocesos desde el año 1985 en adelante. En la Argentina, apenas terminada la democracia, se realiza una comisión, por la verdad, una comisión sobre la desaparición forzada de personas, la CONADEP, y luego, posteriormente, muy rápidamente, en 1985, se llevan adelante los juicios contra los comandantes de las juntas militares, condenándolos a prisiones perpetuas, casi todos ellos, como responsables de estos crímenes. A partir de la documentación que se logra en estos juicios, comienzan los juicios a los subalternos, y ahí comienza en la Argentina lo que llamamos un periodo de impunidad, porque los integrantes de las Fuerzas Armadas hacen levantamientos militares, lo que generan estas leyes de punto final y obediencia debida que impiden la continuación de los juicios. Cuando yo hablaba anteriormente sobre el rol fundamental del movimiento de las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, me refería a esto, que si bien estas leyes no permitían la continuación de los juicios, tuvimos en nuestra sociedad salidas creativas e ingeniosas y novedosas para continuar con esta temática en el presente. Y así surgen los juicios por la verdad, es decir, los juicios que, si bien no permiten condenar, permiten el derecho a la verdad, el saber a lo que pasó con cada uno y cada una de los desaparecidos. También los juicios internacionales, convenciones internacionales, trabajos de organizaciones como el equipo argentino de antropología forense. Es decir, que si bien la justicia no nos daba un espacio, nosotros íbamos encontrando estas maneras de seguir adelante. Hasta, como dije anteriormente, en el 2003 surge un gobierno que toma estas demandas y así comienzan nuevamente los juicios por los crímenes de la dictadura. Entonces, por eso yo decía que todo lo que sabemos hoy es gracias a los sobrevivientes que vienen declarando incansablemente hace más de 40 años. Concretamente, en relación al caso de la ESMA, hoy estamos transitando los alegatos del quinto tramo judicial, ESMA 5, y que tiene como investigación central los delitos de violación, esclavitud sexual, es decir, los delitos integrales contra la integridad sexual, que es muy importante para nosotros. Desde su apertura en el año 2015, el museo ya fue visitado por más de 400.000 personas, teniendo un crecimiento interanual del 20%. Hoy, lamentablemente, como muchos de todos nosotros, ante la pandemia el museo está cerrado al público. Ahora lentamente estamos tratando de comenzar con una reapertura cuidada, pero mantenemos una agenda activa por redes y por el sitio web, a quien invito a todos y a todas a visitarnos. Y insisto nuevamente con la presencia de Sylvia Lavaidu aquí, que tanto me honra, que desde el museo tomamos como un eje fundamental la perspectiva de género, tanto para articular lo que fue un plan integral de represión, pero también la especificidad de lo que fue esa represión contra las mujeres y poder justamente articular aquel tema de este pasado reciente con las demandas de las mujeres hoy en nuestro presente. Vi que están participando, si no me equivoco, organizaciones de la sociedad civil que luchan por los derechos de las mujeres, así que me interesa muchísimo la opinión de ellas. Por estos antecedentes, porque acabo de relatar muy sintéticamente, y por el carácter pionero y ejemplar a nivel mundial de la actuación de la justicia, es decir, el camino de justicia transicional que decidió tomar nuestro país, que es una justicia en tribunales ordinarios comunes y con condena basada en el código penal de nuestro país. Creemos que el Museo Sitio de Memoria ESMA, ex centro de tortura, ex centro clandestino de detención, tortura y exterminio, debe estar incluido entre los bienes culturales de la lista de Patrimonio Mundial creada por UNESCO. Sin embargo, nuestra convicción no basta. Debe estar respaldada por una postulación construida de manera laboriosa y en un todo de acuerdo con los criterios internacionales para este tipo de inscripción. Este proyecto es un esfuerzo de todas y todos y representa un desafío político, social y cultural que expresa un acuerdo profundo de todos los argentinos y argentinas, representado por el Estado Nacional y que llegará a ser una contribución significativa para toda la humanidad. Quiero decir en esta reunión con ustedes que para el logro de la nominación a Patrimonio Mundial de UNESCO, además de un expediente técnico excelente, es fundamental demostrar que hay un verdadero compromiso del Estado que presenta el bien a declarar en todas sus dimensiones, como decía, la política, la diplomática, la social y la económica. Desde hace años estamos trabajando en la construcción de esta candidatura con la participación de los grupos de interés, tanto a nivel nacional como a nivel internacional, y entendiendo el valor excepcional universal que tiene la ESMA. Uno, negativo, el terrorismo de Estado basado en la desaparición forzada de personas, y otro positivo, el logro de justicia a través de un proceso de consensos sociales y políticos y una fuerte convicción del Estado en mantener las políticas públicas de memoria, verdad y justicia. Para finalizar, siento que tenemos mucho trabajo por delante hasta junio del 2023, fecha que se definiría la postulación, y hay muchísimo para hacer desde todos los ámbitos del Estado y de los diversos sectores de la sociedad. Como saben, y si no les cuento, existe un debate muy acalorado acerca de la incorporación de los sitios de memoria a la lista de Patrimonio Mundial. Entiendo que los países de África están trabajando con mucha convicción en esta temática y estoy segura que tienen mucho para aportarnos en este camino. Al mismo tiempo, por lo sintéticamente expuesto aquí, creo que nuestros países, Sudáfrica y Argentina, tenemos historias y procesos diversos, pero un sentido común de actuar siempre para fortalecer las democracias y colaborar desde nuestros espacios a construir sociedades más justas, más libres y más igualitarias. Como mencioné anteriormente, hace 3 años empezamos un intercambio puntual entre Robben Island y la ESMA y esperamos poder inaugurar el próximo año en la ESMA, si la pandemia nos permite, una exhibición común denominada Sur-Sur, Memorias en Presente, y que justamente lo que trata es de articular estas experiencias para sacar aportes en común y poder dialogar entre nuestros dos países. Cada una de las organizaciones que ustedes representan son eslabones fundamentales para el logro de pertenecer a la UNESCO, Patrimonio del Nunca Más, con el objetivo también de articular y fortalecer los procesos de memoria, verdad y justicia en Argentina, en Latinoamérica y en el mundo. Quisiera compartir con ustedes que cuando terminamos una visita en el museo, siempre les decimos a los visitantes que se han convertido en nuevos testimoniantes y transmisores de lo que ocurrió en la ESMA. Ahora, después de esta presentación, los convoco y las convoco a que sean también transmisores de nuestro proyecto, que estoy convencida podrá aportar un poco de los sueños de construir y vivir en un mundo mejor. Muchísimas gracias nuevamente y estoy a disposición para este intercambio.
At your disposition, I am sure that we will be able to carry out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. We will now open the main discussion, the importance of the memory sites for truth and justice. Our next panelist is Luknayo Kalata, who is an award-winning broadcast journalist who has worked for E-News, now ENCA, among others, and he joined the national broadcaster in 2011. He is the son of Ford Kalata, one of the 4 anti-apartheid political activists known as the Craddock Four, who were assassinated by the apartheid government on the 27th of June, 1985, when he was just 3 years old. He wrote a book, My Father Died for This, which parallels his father's life with his own experience as a journalist and an activist. Mr. Kalata continues today the fight for justice in the judicial process against the perpetrators of the assassination of the Craddock Four. Mr. Kalata, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you can all hear me. Thank you so very much for this opportunity and also for this invite to speak to you all at an event as auspicious as this one. I'd like to start off my address today by one of my favorite quotes. It was Marcus Messiah Garvey who once said that a people without the knowledge of their history, their origin, and their culture is like a tree without roots. Surely, both are destined to die. Now, as a child, I had a natural curiosity and gravitated towards the history of my family, the history of my town, the history of my country, particularly the struggle against apartheid. And I remember how this quote by Marcus Garvey made me feel that it was okay to be interested in knowing who I was and where my people came from. For some strange reason, I never wanted to be like that tree that sat without roots. I guess it was also easier for me to pursue a deeper and more in-depth knowledge of my past because my roots lay in this small town of Craddock in the Eastern Cape. Now, this little town has a history that's so unique in the struggle against both colonialism as well as apartheid. And I hope that you'll allow me to mention just a few of the accomplishments. Now, in the 1930s and the 1940s, Craddock was home to the headquarters of the African National Congress in the Eastern Cape. Now, at that time, my great-grandfather, James Kalata, was the Secretary General of the organization. In 1953, my great-grandfather was under house arrest and could not travel outside of Craddock. The ANC hosted its conference in my little hometown. At that conference in 1953, a gentleman by the name of Z.K. Matthews first spoke of the idea of a freedom charter. And because, and that idea was then fleshed out at that conference. And therefore, Cradock was recognized as the cradle of the charter. In 1985, the residents of Cradock successfully led a revolution against the tyranny of the apartheid government. And they managed for a period of about 6 months in 1985 to govern themselves, free of the oppression of the apartheid government. It was this revolution that led to my father, Fort Khalata, and his comrades, Matthew Gonewe, Sparo Mkhonto, and Sicelo Mhlauli, to be brutally assassinated by the apartheid government. The day of their funeral on the 20th of July proved to be quite a turning point in South Africa's history, because just hours after they were buried, then apartheid president P.W. Botha declared the country's first state of emergency in 25 years. The previous state of emergency was in 1960, after the Sharpeville massacre, where the apartheid government had mowed down 69 unarmed Black people. Now, I was fortunate in that I grew up with the history, not only of my family, of my community, of my town around me. Yet I'm often left without words when I see just how little of this history is memorialized. I guess in South Africa today, it's wishful thinking to be talking about memorializing our martyrs when we're still desperately trying to get the ANC government and the national prosecuting authorities to prosecute those behind the murders of our fathers, of our mothers, of our brothers, our sisters, our aunts and our uncles. How can we even begin to memorialize those who sacrificed their lives for our freedom in a manner that's worthy, in a manner that honors them, when the government for which they died for has, 27 years after democratic rule, still not prosecuted those who were responsible for their murders? I'm sure everybody here has heard the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. In South Africa, in 2021, that is true for hundreds of families who lost their loved ones at the hand of the barbaric apartheid security forces. Now, this lack of prosecution by our government is a betrayal of our martyrs. It is a betrayal of their families. It is a betrayal of their communities. It is a betrayal of everything that our martyrs lived and what they died for. It is also a stark failure to affirm to each and everybody, not only in South Africa, but across the world, that Black lives matter. What is the point of a concrete monument or a garden of remembrance that's named after the Cradock Four? Yet their killers, who were denied amnesty by the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission, continue to live as free men among us. How can we pay tribute to Fort Khalata, or to Matthew Gonewe, or to Sparo Mkhonto, or to Sicelo Mhlauli, or the hundreds of other political activists, such as Mapetla Mohapi, who was killed on this day on the 5th of August, 1976, in police detention. How can we pay tribute to those people when those who planned and executed their brutal murders are yet to be held accountable for the crimes that they committed against our humanity? How are we able to prevent such atrocities from ever being repeated again in the future? How do we set the example for future generations to let them know that as a global society, we will not tolerate such dastardly acts ever again? Our failure, therefore, to hold the criminals who committed these crimes against our humanity to account could have devastating consequences for the world of tomorrow if we do not ensure that justice is served. Please allow me to conclude by saying this. The first port of call, at least in my opinion, of keeping the memories of our martyrs alive should be to ensure justice for their lives. Only once that is achieved can we then confidently put in place programs, events, literature, films, festivals, anything that we could possibly do to honor those who sacrificed their lives for our freedom. Memory is hollow without justice. I thank you all for taking the time and for inviting me to this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucanio. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sylvia Lavaidu, who was kidnapped by an ESMA task force on the 29th of December 1976 at the age of 20. She was almost 6 months pregnant. Her daughter, Vera, was born in captivity at the ESMA. In 1978, she went into exile in Spain. She has testified before the National Commission called CONADEP and in the trials for crimes against humanity that began in 2004. Sylvia Lavaidu is one of the 3 complainants in the first trial for sexual abuse at the ESMA. Sylvia, the floor is yours. Sylvia, can you hear us? Silvia, ¿me escuchás?
Sí, perdón, tenía apagado el audio. Les quería agradecer la invitación a este.
I wanted to thank you for the invitation to this event.
Para mí es un orgullo estar aquí. Alejandra Naftal ha descrito con mucha precisión lo que significó la ESMA como campo de exterminio, de detención y de secuestro, y por eso estamos aquí luchando porque se pueda obtener la candidatura en UNESCO. Se habló aquí también y se agradeció el papel que los sobrevivientes hemos tenido en esta construcción de la memoria, verdad y justicia, y si bien es cierto que gracias a los innumerables testimonios se ha conseguido llevar a juicio y condenar a multitud de genocidas, también quiero decir que para los sobrevivientes todo este proceso ha sido enormemente reparador, en el sentido de que nos ha permitido hablar, contar la historia de cada uno, que se pueda, que la sociedad haya podido visibilizar la dimensión del horror en todas sus expresiones, y por tanto eso ha sido en cierta forma reparador, junto con las condenas, por supuesto, y la creación para nosotros del Museo Sitio Memoria ESMA también es muy importante, porque representa la posibilidad de que el mundo conozca de primera mano lo que fue aquello. Y desde luego es un lugar que para mí significa la materialización como un monumento al nunca más. Y en ese sentido creo que si consiguiéramos esta candidatura sería otro triunfo para los sobrevivientes y para este proceso de construcción de memoria, verdad y justicia, que como todos sabemos no termina nunca. Muchas gracias por estos minutos.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Silvia.
For those in Argentina, I would like to highlight that August in South Africa is Women's Month. And it is established to pay tribute to more than 20,000 women who marched to the Union buildings in 9th of August, 1956, to protest against the extension of past laws to women. It is quite significant, therefore, that we have in our panel 4 women who have been fighting for human rights all their lives. I hope, Mr. Calata, that you don't feel offended by this.
Not in the least, ma'am.
Let me tell you a little bit of the South African panelists that will take the floor next. In the mid-1976, after the student uprising in Soweto, 11 women, largely members of the newly formed Federation of Black Women, were detained under Section 6 of the Terrorism Act and placed in solitary confinement. They were imprisoned in Constitution Hill Women's Jail. Mrs. Joyce Seroki and Mrs. Lorraine Tabane were among these 11 women. Mrs. Joy Piliso Seroki is a teacher, a social scientist, a struggle veteran, and a filmmaker. She is the recipient of numerous honors, including Father Trevor Huddleston Note for Comfort Award, the National Order, the Order of Baobab in Silver, the Order of Simon of Crean. Miss Lorraine Tabane was an activist in the struggle against apartheid since her high school years and was detained on several occasions as a result. She was convicted under the Suppression of Communism Act and was incarcerated at the Old Fort in Johannesburg. The Old Fort is now a memorial site and is called Women's Jail. She obtained a BA degree from University of South Africa in 1989, specializing in social studies. And she also studied in the Netherlands in 1991. We are honored to welcome them to this webinar, and I would like to note that they will be introduced by Ms. Magauta Molefi, a former political prisoner at the Women's Jail in Cornhill, a political activist during apartheid, and also a community worker. She is now a documentary filmmaker. Mrs. Molefi. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. You have said a short bio of Joyce Seroki and Lorraine, we call her Lulu Tabane. I also knew them from the activist days, and I was also detained at number 4, that is Cornhill. They were under Section 10 and I was under Section 6. And I was also detained at John Foster. So we are privileged to have them talk on our behalf. We have a grouping called Sizoya Sibui at Fort. which is a grouping of women who were detained at number 4, including the female prisoners, or what we call for criminal acts, because most of them were arrested for selling alcohol. Some were arrested for being illegal in Johannesburg, during the past days. And some of them were arrested for immorality acts, that's having affairs with white men. So we are that grouping, and as a group of activists, we try to keep the spirit of number 4 alive. We do projects and all that. So Oath Joyce and them are part of that, although now she has retired. And then speaking about the documentary, maybe briefly before they speak, I decided to do this documentary called Surviving John Foster, because John Foster Square was also a torture house for a lot of political prisoners. And most of the time, little is said about women activists in our country. So I put together the documentary, and women are talking about their stories, their experience at the hands of the apartheid regime. And I'm more thrilled, listening to the presentation on the ESMA memorial site, because we were thinking John Foster should also be a memorial site. It's a building that had people killed, people tortured, people thrown out of the windows, and it is standing empty. So we are aiming as the Surviving John Foster Square group to push the government to memorialize that place, because it has a very bad history. And it is not only Robben Island that is important in this country. There are prisons standing. Kronstadt, men were sent to Robben Island, and women when they were sentenced, they were sent to Kronstadt. So we want all these cases opened, all these places talked about, all these places memorialized, because that is our history. It's a history of the struggle, and we are surprised that the government is not coming out to let our children and the future generation know how we achieved this freedom. It was through blood, it was through torture, it was through death, and we want that back. So very soon we'll be releasing. It is finalized, the Surviving John Foster, and it will be released this month because it's Women's Month. Thank you. So I'll throw it over to Ma'am Joyce to speak. It's on.
Yeah. Good afternoon, friends. I would like to thank the organizers of this occasion for inviting us to share our experiences and our stories about the places where we were incarcerated. Our history, when I watched the video on ESWI and heard the horrors that took place there, I just shivered, sitting here at home, comfortable. And I just said to myself, if ever I once complained for being incarcerated at the number 4 women's jail, I just felt it was like I was on holiday compared to what these people experienced. I can't imagine even our horrific stories, as Mahouta was telling us, of John Foster, where people were tortured, people were shocked, the women's nipples were shocked, and the men's parts were also shocked, and scars are remaining of all those people. And I think I would love us to have this solidarity with the women of Esme and Mary, us in South Africa, just to share these experiences and have, well, once COVID is over, hopefully, we could have such an occasion where we could meet and share and visit, because anything that you see with your eyes, which you have experienced, is always going to be embedded in your heart and soul, and you are able to sit down with your children and say to them, this is horrible and it should never happen again. So Mahauta, I don't know what you want me to share about number 4, but I can say that I was detained there in 1976, and it was after the storm of the youth unrest, and then we had this horrible government putting more and more laws that are going to discourage the people. And I must say, the women were originally told, I remember when the women in the early days said, whilst we tackle racism, we should also talk about gender, the issues of gender, because they are so deep-seated and people can never comprehend. But the men said, no, women, stay away from that. We must concentrate on the struggle against racism. And once that is over, we will invite you now to tackle your specific issues of gender and how they affect you in terms of gender inequality and the horrible gender-based violence that is going on. And the women agreed and said, yes, we will step away and concentrate on this struggle. And once that struggle was achieved, to our shock and betrayal, the women were left out. And yet, according to what you've heard from Mahauta, the women were in the forefront. Stories the embassy told about the women marching to Pretoria and women participating in all the protests. And they never said, because we are women, we will stay at home and look after our children. So I was one of those 11 women who were detained to the fort. And I went to the fort and I imagined that as I came in, I thought I would see everybody. And to my shock, it was silence, complete silence, because the women were held in solitary confinement. You know, I can never begin to explain what solitary confinement does to somebody else. And you sit in that small cell, locked up there, all by yourself. You are not even given a book to read, no newspapers, and suddenly you are alone. And you can imagine, for me, being detained at that time, leaving a 5-year-old child at home with my mother. And I was fortunate because I had a mother who was there with me and who was looking after my child. Many other women who were detained never had their children cared for because they didn't have mothers and so on. And you can imagine what that means. I could, from the video, and as me, I see that there were people that were whose babies were taken away from them. I'm sure, as Lorraine will share with you, women were born in jail. I mean, children were born in jail. And can you imagine the future of that child? So, number 4 for me was a place of honor, and it imprisoned people of political high profile like Nelson Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, Mahatma Gandhi, and as Mahauta was saying, it also had simple housewives who were arrested because they were trying to make a life for their children by selling their home brew. Then, because our husbands had to pay this tax because they were moved from the rural areas and taken away as migrant laborers. And some would walk along the streets of Johannesburg and would be taken because they happened to be on the wrong side. It is now a site of memory. This place that used to be a horror. And for me, that is what is important now. Because when I was chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality, I was asked by my colleagues, how can you go to an office that is in the place where you were incarcerated? How can you go and work there? And I said to myself, in the true spirit of resilience that had embraced me and my generation of activists, I refused to let the past pull me down. I took it in my strides and led my commissioners and staff to Cornhill to redeem the place, which was a place of pain, and it must redeem it to become a beacon of hope for the future generations. Because that is what we are here for now. The younger people who must know the history of the past. Lukanya has explained how he still feels. And he was lucky because he was brought up by parents who were active and who talked to him about their experiences. But many other children who were born when we were free don't know that history. And that is that history that is so important for our children. That, as Nelson Mandela said, he said, we should never, never again experience the atrocities that we experienced before. And if we can't forget, then the places of memory are our hope, where we will be able to take our children and great-grandchildren, and so that they can see where their parents were persecuted and they must know why they were persecuted. So once they have those responsibilities and those rights now, it is for them to say, I'm lucky to have these human rights, but in order for me to be responsible and enjoy them, I should know what happened before. One thing I liked about
algo que me gusta sobre Constitution Hill, donde nos habían detenido como mujeres,
or whoever the people who planned this thing made it a point that it should also be a location of the Constitutional Court, the highest court in South Africa. And also it must accommodate the Chapter 9 institutions, which were set up to buttress our democracy, our human rights, which we never experienced before. And today, I'm even more excited about that site, that area, because it's the Constitutional Court that has done a wonderful thing that nobody ever thought of, to have a past president imprisoned, even though he was against it. But the rule of law made it that he should go in. And for us who never experienced that democracy, you look back in the past, how this thing could never have happened. It would only happen for us being tortured and being persecuted. That is my pride about this memory site called Constitution Hill. I know you speak of Robben Island, it's also another one, but I feel, having been there, and when people thought I was not going to be able to work there because I just said I could never, because we turned around evil for good, and our children can go and see for themselves and be told of the atrocities that have happened there. Magauta, I don't know what more would you like me to talk about, but one thing I can say is, so another amazing thing that happened to me when I was in that jail was to work with the Black wardens, the people I thought were horrible. How dare they could work under such conditions? And to my shock, when this woman led me the first day into my cell, she says to me, Mama, I was supposed to do a body search. I can't bring myself to search a woman like you. I said, what kind of a search is this? And then she said, I wouldn't want to talk about it, but if when you get to the cell and the white lieutenant comes later on, please tell her that I searched you. And those wardens, Black wardens, are the ones who made it possible for us to send messages to our fellow inmates, messages home, because we were locked up in solitary. So you go in there with your own mind, with your own feelings of hatred, and you say, all wardens of the jail are cruel, but you discover there's humanity in some of them. And those were some of the rare things I was able to say to myself. I have had good lessons here. I may have had terrible time, but I have had good lessons.
Thank you, Ma'am Joyce. Thank you very much. I will then call up
Magauta, I think you froze. Are you still there? Miss Lorraine?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I had to change. Sorry for earlier on. I had to change my device. The other one, was not functioning properly. Good afternoon, everybody. Joaha, good afternoon. Joaha is. Can you hear me now? I've unmuted.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm receiving your message that I must unmute. Joaha, thank you. Joaha is Joyce Roque. That's her clan name. That's what we used to call her. Her by. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, number four. I think Magauta, we started telling our stories. The stories were published, but not all the stories were published. So we need another one. You know, thinking
nuestras historias fueron publicadas. Estamos pensando en todas estas cosas, aquellas que podemos recordar.
The first thing you get there, you get this word who must search you. That's so humiliating. That's such a pervasive thing. So the first thing I remember about number 4 was I even had to fight that. Joaha was fortunate. It was a black warden who was doing the search. With us, it was white wardens who were supposed to search us, and they were going to search us right at the entrance. So the very first time we entered the number 4, we had to fight. You know, we refused to be humiliated, to strip people, to prick you and find out if you have got hidden things in you. So it was just a humiliating thing, and I think we haven't said enough, a lot about that. And Magauta, like you say, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things which we need to talk about. You know, I remember you invited me to be part of the documentary of John Foster, but I was never interrogated at John Foster. I was interrogated at Compol. Yeah, I was put in an office, a room full of blood on the walls, just to intimidate you, and you are asked questions. You are there for 48 hours. People don't know where you are before we were taken to number 4. So those are some of the stories we also have to talk about, and those are Compol are some of the things like the women's jail in Kronstadt, which needs to be interrogated and put into the memory South Africa, because a lot of horrible things happened there also. A lot of people who were detained in Pretoria were tortured and humiliated in Comport. So it is important that we should talk about those things. Now, coming to number 4, even number 4, the story about number 4 is not complete, you see, because we still need to interrogate this I don't know how to call it, these different moralities. There are certain times which are more important than other times, whereas a story has got to include everything, whether you like that thing or you don't like that thing. It should evolve from a certain period to a certain period, and all the stories should be told equally, and for me, the most important thing about keeping our memories is when we look now, we see that there is this thing of trying to compare morality, that Black people fought, the white people did this, they contributed to our freedom, but our freedom was fought by us. We are the ones who struggled. Whoever de Klerk might have done what he has done, he didn't do it because he liked it. False morality. We need to counter those types of narratives to put our stories across, so that people can know what truly happened in it. So coming to Constitution Hill, it was a painful thing, but today, because there's this memorial, we can even begin to laugh about the experiences we had there. They were not nice. I for one, for instance, I discovered in jail that I was pregnant with my second child. When I went out, I was just a month or so to deliver that little girl. But she's an adult now. She's not a little girl. She's between. So we even the stories of number 4, we haven't told them.
Las historias de número 4. No contamos todas las historias. Todavía tenemos que contarlas.
There are also other stories which are outside of Constitutional Hill, which we also need to pursue. And I'm making a promise now that I will join you forcefully in fighting for those memorial sites like Comport, because there are still a lot of stories which need to be memorialized in Comport. I think I just need to say that it was a humiliating but an empowering experience to be detained. It has made better people of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. Thank you very much. I went offline. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk about our. Thank you.
I think I should also share something very positive that took place at number 4 when we were all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. When we as a group, once we were now no longer in solitary confinement, we used to share our lunch together and sit for a few minutes.
Y nos sentábamos por unos minutos.
And our experiences. And then one day, one of us noticed that one of the common law prisoners was cleaning and scrubbing the floor and did not have a panty on. And she asked this girl, this woman, why are you not wearing a panty? And she says, we are not given panties. For this whole month, we were not given panties. And we all decided at that time that we were going to take this issue on with the lieutenant. Usually the lieutenant would stand in the morning and each time would get out of the cell and would ask each one of us, what is your complaint? And one would complain and say, I would like to see the doctor, or I would like to see my lawyer. But this time we decided that when the lieutenant asks, what is your complaint? We must all say, why do the prisoners not have benches? And she would walk from one to the other, and it was the same thing. And we said, Lieutenant, we would like you to address this situation immediately. Well, she didn't take time. And when we threatened her and said, we are not going to take no for an answer, then suddenly, even before we could hear the announcement that the prisoners were now issued with benches, I see one of the prisoners coming next to us and dancing and chipping away her skirt to show us that I've got my panty, and thanks to you and your activism. And we are active right in prison. So
remember
remember that story.
And even the 1976 students, Sis Joyce, the ones who where we did a hunger strike to have them released. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. So even in prison, the activism was still there. Eh?
Was still alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Those are our stories here at home at number 4. Well, some of us didn't even see that because we were in solitary confinement from capture until release. So we didn't see that, but we had them. So thank you, ladies. Is that all? Thank you very much for representing us. And thanks for inviting us. I think we are through now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, all these speakers for the interventions, for the testimonies. It was very powerful. So thank you very much. We will now open the floor for questions from the audience. There have been some coming through on the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. Okay. Let's see, the first one, it's here. What international instruments are there that can be used to persuade domestic governments to take steps to ensure truth, memory, and justice, and prosecution for inhumane acts? I don't know if anyone would like to reply. Would anyone like to take the... Okay, Alejandra.
Puedo comentar, sí.
I would like to say, yes, what I think of...
Que se diferencia en lo que fue el proceso quizás sudafricano en Argentina, lo que se tomó como decisión y sobre todo, como dije en mi intervención, por la demanda del movimiento de derechos humanos, de las madres, las abuelas, los sobrevivientes, los hijos, del camino de la justicia. Es decir, lo que se trató es de lograr una justicia con todas las garantías constitucionales, una justicia probatoria, una justicia basada en el Código Penal, y que por supuesto fue conflictiva, como mencioné anteriormente, tuvo sus avances y sus retrocesos. Pero coincido con la intervención de Lucanio, creo que así se pronuncia, del compañero, y también escuchando a las compañeras, de que una memoria real, efectiva, constructiva y reparatoria no puede ir, no va de la mano si no hay justicia. Como dije anteriormente, en Argentina el instrumento realmente que logra, ¿no? de que hoy el proceso es ineludible: memoria, verdad y justicia. Y los instrumentos fueron la movilización popular, es decir, la articulación entre las demandas del pueblo y lo que pasó en Argentina, que finalmente hubo un poder ejecutivo que escuchó estas demandas y que desde el año 2003 en adelante, con el gobierno de Néstor Kirchner en adelante, se reabrieron las causas judiciales. Hoy en la Argentina se llevan adelante, y esto se lo comento también a las compañeras, que no se llevan solo adelante juicios por lo que pasó en la ESMA, sino por lo que pasó en todos los centros clandestinos de detención, tortura y exterminio que se llevaron adelante en el país. Hoy se llevan juicios hasta el día de hoy, no tengo el número exacto, pero tengo entendido que serán más de 30 juicios por distintos lugares, y hoy ya tenemos alrededor de 1.500 condenados y que están cumpliendo sus penas en cárceles comunes. Y cada juicio va habilitando nueva información, nuevas investigaciones, y como dijo acá la compañera Silvia y también las otras, estos procesos van a durar muchos años por delante, pero sí creo que en la Argentina tenemos la convicción de que hay que seguirlos, y hoy contamos con un gobierno que tiene en su agenda pública esta tarea y que pone los recursos para llevar adelante estos juicios, insisto, con todas las garantías constitucionales. Ustedes piensen que durante 40 años no hubo justicia en Argentina y no tenemos un solo caso de justicia, lo que llamamos nosotros justicia por mano propia, es decir, una justicia uno a uno, sino que las víctimas, tanto hablo sobrevivientes como familiares, han esperado el tiempo necesario para que esto se lleve adelante. Así que, sintéticamente, ¿ante qué instrumentos? Movilización, movilización, movilización.
Thank you, Alejandra. Okay, another question. Inhumane regimes have made people disappear.
Otra pregunta, regímenes inhumanos han hecho que gente desaparezca. ¿Cómo los hacemos reaparecer
profiles, their children? I think this was basically, I think it was touched by all the panelists, but if anyone would like to give us some thoughts.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, inhumane regimes have made people disappear. How do we make them reappear in their stories, their profiles, their children? How do we make them alive again, if you can say that?
Okay. I think once children have disappeared, I'm thinking now of our Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which no longer exists now. But there are many ways of many committees that are still, for instance, there's the Kulumani advocacy group. That is a very strong group of men and women who were people who were imprisoned and those whose children have disappeared. These are organizations that will help the families to get information from the government as to what is the progress. Like Lucano was saying that up to now, they still have not punished the perpetrators. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did recommend that those who didn't give amnesty should be persecuted. But we don't hear of those cases. But we must not let those families remain not knowing. They must be helped to say, we still want to know the truth. And if you keep on hammering on these issues, maybe something will happen. I don't know. Maybe Lucanio could have something to say. But it's been disappointing for us in South Africa that some of the recommendations of the TRC have not been followed. And it had to take individuals like the parents of Ahmed Timor to really proceed with that case. But those stories should be told all the time so that they are never forgotten. And maybe that's what's going to help those families to say, if people are still crying out on our behalf, then at least there's hope.
Yeah, as citizens in the country here, we really don't know why our government did not reopen cases, try to find people and punish the people who really tortured us. We don't know, we still have to be told. So it's things that we didn't talk about for a long time. And unlike Argentina now, when the public is standing to demand and the government is supporting with us, the wheels of judgment are moving very slowly. People who are opening cases need to get money to pay lawyers or get lawyers for human rights to support them. But now people are standing up. They are standing up, I think, because of the failure of the government, which failed to deliver on the promises to the people. And I think very soon we'll see a lot of cases coming out and people being dug out wherever they are and people being arrested and going to jail. Unfortunately, some of them are dead now, the people who tortured us. They are not here. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question. This is for the Argentines. So Ale, if you can answer a bit of this. Are there any signs of intergenerational national trauma and anger in the psyche and behavior of Argentines? Because psychoanalysts are introducing this angle in explaining South Africa's dysfunctionality.
No sé si Silvia quiere contestar.
I don't know if Sylvia wants to answer. She doesn't have.
Intento, no sé si entendí bien la pregunta, pero lo que entendí es cuál sería, si es que la tuvo, la repercusión del psicoanálisis en todo este proceso. ¿Es algo así?
No. I'm gonna just say it in Spanish for her. Silvia, ¿vos me escuchás?
Sí.
No, lo que preguntan es si hay signos como de trauma o de enojo intergeneracional en Argentina como sociedad, digamos, porque acá los psicoanalistas están introduciendo ese concepto para explicar como las divisiones y la disfuncionalidad del gobierno, de Sudáfrica.
¿En qué sentido? Es decir,
como que quedó un trauma en la sociedad, digamos, a eso se genera, como que hay una generación que está como con un trauma o enojo, digamos, a eso se refieren, como a la Argentina en general, no a las personas. No sé si me explico.
Bueno, tal vez yo no sea la persona más adecuada para hablar de esto, puesto que llevo 43 años fuera de la Argentina, entonces no podría hacer una valoración más precisa. Es decir, en cualquier caso la impresión que me da es que si ese enojo existe, en parte puede ser por el conocimiento de lo que fue esta experiencia en la Argentina y de alguna forma el arrasamiento de una generación que fue la de los años 70, que dio lugar a exilios, en fin, a situaciones
that led to
a las familias y a un entorno social durante mucho tiempo, ¿no? En ese sentido sí, pero también creo que hay otras condiciones en la rabia de los jóvenes que tienen que ver con cuestiones más generales de las políticas y de cuál es su situación en el mundo hoy por hoy, ¿no? Mucho más difíciles que las de otras generaciones, y que todo esto va junto, pero creo que para los jóvenes, si ha habido enojo, también ha habido una toma de conciencia en el sentido del nunca más, que la han hecho propia, y en ese sentido creo que lejos de haberse enquistado como trauma, ha tenido esta posibilidad de esta salida mucho más reparadora y creativa para la sociedad, ¿no?
Right. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Ale, do you want to add something, or should I move to the next question?
Insisto con respecto a los traumas colectivos de una sociedad. Obviamente fue muy doloroso para la Argentina lo que ocurrió durante el terrorismo de Estado, como decía bien Silvia, con una generación diezmada, con 30.000 detenidos desaparecidos, exiliados, prisioneros, muchos presos políticos, los niños y niñas que aún seguimos buscando, que nacieron en cautiverio y están en manos todavía de apropiadores sin conocer su identidad. Es decir, hay todavía en el presente, digamos, temas a resolver, y la propia experiencia de las víctimas, ¿no? Que son imborrables las huellas de lo acontecido. Pero insisto que si hay un Estado, digamos, nosotros pensamos que hablamos de terrorismo de Estado, es decir, el Estado en contra de sus compatriotas. Pero si hay un Estado que toma ese guante y que se ocupa, como decía antes, de los procesos de justicia, cantidad de leyes de reparación hacia las víctimas, tanto económicas como la creación de ámbitos para tratamientos psicoanalíticos, incluir en las currículas escolares para, como comentaban acá las compañeras, las nuevas generaciones estudien en las escuelas lo que ocurrió durante la dictadura. Es decir, un combo de medidas que tienen que ver con las distintas dimensiones de lo que fue el terrorismo de Estado y sus consecuencias. Creo que o los sitios de memoria, la gran política de memoria que hay en el país, creo que ese trauma se reconvierte en una toma de banderas de las presentes generaciones para reconvertirla en las luchas del presente. Doy como ejemplo un símbolo que ya es un símbolo nacional, que es el pañuelo blanco que se pusieron las madres que buscaban a sus hijos en plena dictadura. Hoy es un símbolo, y las mujeres que luchan por sus libertades hicieron el pañuelo verde, es como un legado de aquel pañuelo blanco al pañuelo verde en las luchas del presente. Así que creo que, y no sé, decía, la intervención del psicoanálisis, digamos, en Argentina hay cantidad de distintas manifestaciones, producciones del ámbito del arte, de la literatura, del cine, que toman como temas inspiradores todas las acciones durante y post dictadura. Lo que quiero decir que Argentina, desde después de la última dictadura, porque nosotros somos un país que durante el siglo XX tuvimos dictaduras y democracias restringidas intermitentemente, desde el 83 en adelante, es la primera vez en nuestro país que tenemos tantos años de democracia ininterrumpida, con todo lo que la democracia nos debe en cuanto a educación, en cuanto a pobreza, en cuanto a pleno empleo, todas las deudas de la democracia, pero sí lo que ha dejado la experiencia de la última dictadura y de toda la lucha del pueblo argentino es que hasta el día de hoy continuamos con la democracia sin interrupciones y que para nosotros es un valor importantísimo. Entonces, no sé si respondo, pero creo que hemos podido reconvertir a través de diversas medidas ese trauma colectivo en reconvertirlo en un proceso de lucha y que aquella experiencia ha dejado huella en el presente para que, como decía Silvia, las nuevas generaciones puedan tomar esa experiencia para las demandas del presente.
Thank you. There's another question to Lucanio.
Gracias. Muchas gracias. Hay una pregunta para Lucanio.
There is an intense heritage site of the Two Rivers Urban Park in Cape Town, where the first wars of liberation and resistance for the San and Khoi in 1510 and 1659. An important portion of the site is under threat of a 4.5 billion multi-purpose commercial development on this sacred floodplain. What kinds of heritage protection assistance or pressure can UNESCO place in stopping these threats or threats of this nature?
All right, thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure if UNESCO at this point would be the first port of call, because I think we're still a little bit far from that point. I think in trying to fight against this development, the very first thing that we have to do would be to obviously engage the city of Cape Town. And I think for the communities, the affected communities here in Cape Town, to organize and to write as many petitions and to request as many meetings as what we need to with the city of Cape Town, for us to be able to try and make the relevant officials understand the historical importance of the site, its value to us as the communities, and that not even 4.5 billion Rand development will be able to replace or is enough for that value, for that piece of land. So, and then if that fails, I'm sure there are organizations, lawyers that will be able to assist in trying to stop this development. And I think only once we have been able to exhaust all of the avenues that exist within the city of Cape Town, within the Western Cape, within the country, can we then take the matter to international organizations such as UNESCO, sure that they will be able to assist. But I think we first have to do as much as we can inside the country, inside the city, to try and get the city's officials to see that sometimes development can never be at the expense of the people and the memory and heritage and history. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, there's another one. Let's see. The failure of South African Prosecution Authority to make a decision regarding prosecution also delays private prosecution and thus protects the perpetrators. Lucanio, again, sorry, your comment?
No, it's okay. Yes, of course. And it's quite sad that we find ourselves in a situation where we are having to wait for justice. It's sad in the sense that the African National Congress, our governing party, is where it is today because our loved ones gave their lives for the ANC to be where it is today. Yet, with the ANC being in power, we are now having to fight it to give us justice. The ANC wants to govern. And as part of the responsibilities of wanting to be a government, justice can only be served through the institutions of the state. Because imagine if I, as a citizen, were to decide that the ANC is taking too long, I must now go and find the individuals who planned my father's murder, who executed my father's murder, and that I must take justice upon myself. Then we might as well live in a lawless country. So by wanting to govern, the ANC then assumes that responsibility of being the ones that will serve us with justice. Our parents, the remaining parents, such as our mothers, they then voted for the ANC on the basis that we give you our vote, we give you our permission to govern us. Govern us and give us what is due to us. Now, as a family of Fort Galata, at no point have we ever approached the ANC or any government department and asked them for a tender and say, we want a tender, we want money, we want riches, we want to live a life that is separate from the millions of poor people in this country. Not once have we ever done that. Instead, my mother sent us to school where she struggled on a daily basis. My sister is a clinical psychologist. She works for herself. I work as a broadcast journalist, and my younger sister works in the municipality in Kraddock. We are a working class family. And the only thing that we've ever asked the ANC and the government that it leads in this country is for us to give us justice for my father's life. Its failure to do so, for whatever reasons, means that it has turned its back on the very same people that put it in power. The ANC has failed us. It has betrayed us. And when I say us, I mean, yes, of course, me as us as a family, but also the large majority of Black people in this country, because it has failed to affirm that, unlike what the apartheid government said about you, you are worth something. You are a child created in the image of God. You have dreams, you have aspirations. You laugh when you're happy and you cry when you're sad, because that is who we are. So by failing to prosecute the people that committed crimes against our humanity, the ANC perpetuates what the apartheid government said about us, because it says that, oh, you can kill Black people and nothing will ever happen to you. You can kill them in the most heinous ways and we won't hold you accountable because they are nothing. And what we need, and by me fighting for justice for my father, is to correct a wrong that was perpetrated upon his body. But it's also to affirm that my father, as a Black man, he mattered. His life mattered. Our lives mattered. The lives of the communities that he served, those lives mattered. And therefore it is critical. It is critical. And we ask for everybody's help. Everybody that is listening today, we ask for your help. Please help us as we try to pursue justice for the people whose lives were lost in pursuit of our democracy, who today the African National Congress has forgotten, who today the African National Congress fails in every possible way. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucanio. We do have some more questions, but we are way over our time. I think we're gonna wrap up now. I'm sorry if your questions were unanswered. We'll organize something else again. Thank you very much. I think we can agree it was powerful, interesting, moving, and humbling. Thank you, everyone. I would like to now give the floor to Mr. Hanif Bali. He is the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights. Mr. Bali.
Gracias a todos.
Thank you very much. Excuse me.
Ha sido muy interesante.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks to the Argentine Embassy in South Africa for partnering with the Foundation for Human Rights on this important initiative. What we want to stress, sorry, put the video on as well. What we want to stress is that this is part of a long relationship we've had with you. When we had our TRC, believed that we need to have a common narrative in order for society to move forward. However, we have found that even though you presented evidence, even though you have the witnesses, even though people themselves who were the perpetrators, in fact, point out that they did commit these atrocities, even with all this at your fingertips, you still have to keep fighting for the narrative. There are still people undermining this narrative. I raise this because this is what we're trying to do with ESMA, and this is what we should be doing in our own country as well. We need to establish for once and for all, so that there's no undermining of the fact that at the ESMA Museum, at least 5,000 men and women were detained, murdered, tortured, all the atrocities that were committed as part of the, I think, close to 30,000 people who died during the period in Argentina. So what we want to do in this webinar is to raise international awareness of the crimes against humanity, which are common. In Argentina, it was by the civic military dictatorship. In South Africa, it was by the apartheid state, and before that by the colonial state, and before that by the slave state. And we need to share our experiences of the path to justice, where we've learned from each other the approaches taken to fight for this. Now, in South Africa, as we speak, and Lucanio is one of the families, there are a number of apartheid-era families engaged in a number of legal matters in our courts, because the state has not prosecuted persons who had not applied for amnesty and which they were obliged to do in respect of tortures and murders that were carried out. We have an ex-director of public prosecutions confirming under oath that he has received instructions not to proceed with these matters. We have a situation like Lucanio's case, where he has to go to court to ask them to prosecute the perpetrators of the murders of his father and the 3 other gentlemen. Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to go to court as we are doing so now to ask the president to appoint a commission of inquiry as to why these prosecutions have not taken place? What was the interference with the constitutional independence of the prosecution arm in our country? So it's very important for us to work with Argentina. And let's remember the objectives, some of the objectives of this webinar is to reflect and understand victims' perspectives on the issue of memorialization and its importance for the realization of the rights to truth and justice, to learn from the good practices and experiences of both countries, Argentina and South Africa, and to support the Argentinian candidacy for the ESMA Museum to be on the UNESCO World Heritage List, and in supporting this, to promote this with civil society and human rights movements in South Africa. So I want to thank everyone who has participated, the memories of the past, our memories and our eyes of the future, the 2 young ladies who talked about their experiences in what we call number 4 prison, Lucanio, who is still fighting the good fight and will continue to fight the good fight, the people who organized this, Florencia and her colleagues, Kasia and Ahmed from the Foundation for Human Rights. And again, I apologize for using that ugly word, but we will not allow the memory of our sisters and brothers, our fathers and mothers, the so-called victims, to ever be disappeared from either our memories or from those of future generations in our respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Finally, I would like to give the floor now to Councillor Florencia Segura, Chargée d'Affaires of the Embassy of Argentina. Florencia.
Thank you, Barbara. I would like to reiterate everything that my colleague Hanif has already said. I agree with him in all the terms. I would like to thank all panelists for this fruitful conversation, for sharing with us so tremendous testimonies about human rights violations suffered, and also for making us reflect about the importance of the memory as a key player in the process for truth and justice. As we always say, the right to truth is not an individual right to know the whereabouts of the relatives from people who were disappeared or from victims who were tortured during those days. It's a more complex, it's a collective and social right of all societies that need to know the truth of their own history and identity as a country. I believe that memory sites such as ESMA, as we have seen today, the ESMA Museum in Argentina, and here in South Africa, Freedom Park, Robben Island in South Africa, among others, are requested, as we talk today, to teach the new generations that the international community won't tolerate that those mass crimes against humanity will happen again. In this regard, I express my recognition to Ms. Alejandra Naftal as director of the ESMA Memory Site Museum for the work that she and her staff are doing. And I really wish that the ESMA Museum could be included in the UNESCO World Heritage List soon. And of course, to have the support of all the countries, including South Africa. And just to conclude, I would like to reiterate my gratitude to Mr. Hanif Bali on behalf of the Foundation for Human Rights and all his staff for making possible this dream of making this webinar. And we are willing to strengthen our historical cooperation, as Hanif said, between this embassy and the foundation, and developing in the future more initiatives and projects in human rights. So Argentina is always open to share our experience, good practices, learn also from other countries, and just to find the best way for a process for transitional justice and how to build real accountability for our societies regarding past human rights violations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we can conclude this webinar. It was an honor hosting you all. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Muchas gracias a todas, a las compañeras.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.